Now what we can do is we can create our last method in our class here. So we're going to do protected and function, and it's going to be a function called doPage, or a method called doPage, and we're going to head on over to index.php, and this is actually the function that we're going to call here. So we're just going to do something like Rourke and then doPage, and that, outside of any more files that we include here, that's going to be it really for our index.php page, because everything we're going to need from that class is going to be it's going to be set up here, and from there it's just a matter of building out the template, because again we now have our content that we're checking to see if it exists, and we're pulling those objects from those files, from our post or our page or our category or whatever. We're pulling those, and then we're now going to, inside of doPage, we're actually going to load our template. So that's all that the Rourke class that we needed to do. Everything else is going to happen inside of the template. Now, this is a little tricky. Before we get into this, we actually need to create a new template file, or a new functions file over here. So we're going to create a new file. We're going to call this one post.php. This is going to have everything, all the template tags related to working with posts and so forth. For now, we are going to create a function called getPost, because that's what we're going to create one called getPost, and then we're going to create another actually temp functions file called page, and we'll do getPage inside of that. But to start off with this post one, we're going to open up our PHP tags, and we're going to get one called getPost, and need to get function getPost. And then what we're going to pass into this is the slug of the post. Okay. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to get the path to the post. So we're going to do path equals, and we can use our get content path function that we've already created. We're going to, we want a post, and we're going to pass in our slug that was passed in. So that will get us the path, the path. We're going to do a quick check to see if the file exists. If it does not exist, so if that path doesn't exist, then we're going to simply return false, so that we can use that for checking in other places if we want to. And then we are going to we're going to create this variable called markdown. We're going to set that equal to file get contents, and we're going to pass in our path, and this function is going to then, when we pass in a slug of, say, lorem-ipsum, it's going to go in and grab that, check if it exists. It's going to grab it and set this variable equal to whatever is in that file. So our ipsum lorem file, it'll be this content right here. And then from there, what we need to do is we need to parse this and do an initial parse on this. So essentially, we need to separate the JSON from the markdown. And so we're going to use a function. We're going to set post equal to, we're going to use a function called parse, and we're going to pass in our markdown. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit more involved, because we need to sort of hook into our parser. So the first thing that we're going to do is, in our class folder, we're going to add a new folder here. I'm going to drag this up here, but it's going to be this Parsedown class. Now, this is not something, let me just open this up real quick. This is not something that I've written. This is a class that is out there. I'm showing this to you real quick because if you look at this, you'll see just how involved all of this is. Okay, and the point is you don't need to write this. I didn't write this. There are tons of these classes out there. They all work a different way, and really there's no need to reinvent the wheel, I think, when it comes to something as sort of foundational as parsing Markdown. So we're going to just go ahead and use this class, but we still need to, there's some things that we need to do sort of on top of that. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to go back over to our index file, and we need to include our Parsedown class. Now I'm going to put that here right in front of our Rourke include. And again, we're just using dir here, and we are going to do lib, and we're going to do class, and then we're going to do Parsedown and Parsedown .php. Okay, so that's going to get the class included. And then the next thing that we need to do is we need to create another function file called parser. And one second here. So in this, we need to write our parsing function. So if we come over here to lib, we'll create a new file, and we'll create parser.php, and we'll come over here and we'll go ahead and actually do both parser and post. lib/parser.php, and we'll do require once dir, and we'll do lib and post.php. Okay, so that gets those two files that we just included. And then if we open parser, the first thing that we need to do is we need to split the document, because as I mentioned, if you look at this file, ipsum lorem, you got JSON and then you've got Markdown, and this is what sort of separates them. We've used this special marker in here to separate them. So now we need to actually go and do that. So we're going to create a function called split document, and we're going to pass into that raw_document. And then what we need is we need a pattern to split this with. Now, me personally, regex is something that I'm not the greatest at, but fortunately these parsers come with they sort of tell you what to use for them. And so this is the pattern. Essentially what that's going to look for is it's going to look for those 3 equal signs that we have here, and it's going to split the document based off of that. So I'm not going to go too into explaining the pattern there. That's what that pattern does, and we can just go ahead and use that. So then we're going to use preg split, and we're going to pass in the pattern we're going to split on, and then what we're going to split, which is the raw document. Okay, so this is our splitting function, but that's not quite everything that we need at this point. And so we're also going to write a function called parse, and in that we're going to pass in our markdown like we saw before, and with that we're going to split this based off of the function we just created. So parts equals split document, and into that we're going to pass our markdown, and then from there we'll create a function here in a second, but we're going to set result equal to parse meta, which is a function we're going to create, and that's parts 0. So the metadata gets sort of stored as the first part, and then from our file, the metadata, the JSON gets stored as the first part, and then the markdown gets stored as the second part. So we need to sort of deal with both. However, we're not going to parse the content yet. And the reason why we're not going to do that is we still need to pass it around through some other functions, as you'll see here. And so we don't want to be passing it around with it already parsed. We're going to parse it right before we display it on the page, which I think is the best way to go about it. In case there were some things you wanted to do with the markdown specifically along the way, you could do that. but generally you want to try and parse or escape or anything like that as close to when it's going to be output to the page as possible. So that's what we're going to do here. So for right now, we're just going to set result. When we do result and this parse meta method, what it's going to give us back is it's going to essentially turn this into a PHP object. And so all we're going to do is we're going to take our markdown that was also generated, and we're going to set that equal to result content. So we're going to set that equal to parts and then 1, because that's the second element in our array here. And then we're going to return that result. So, and then let's go ahead and write our parse meta function real quick. We actually, this we could maybe get away with not, well, we definitely at this point could get away with not actually having this function and just calling, because we're just going to return JSON decode. We could just call that directly, but I've made it a function because there may be other things in the future that we want to do here, and so we're sort of set up for that. Okay, so essentially this function is going to split the document into one element. It's going to create an array that has one element that has all of the metadata, the JSON object, and then another one that has our markdown. And then we're going to parse, we're going to JSON decode the metadata and create a PHP object, and then we're going to take the markdown and add that to that object, and then we're going to return the entire object. So when we look at this parse method here, this parse function here that we're going to be using inside of our get post here, that's what it does. Okay, and then inside of get post here, once we've done all that, then we can simply return post. Okay, now the reason we need that is because if we come over to our Rourke here, we are going to use that inside of our doPage method here. So inside of doPage, we're gonna start off by globalizing a variable called page. Now that doesn't exist yet, but once it exists, it will now exist in the global space, and we need that because we're going to be including template files and so forth, and this page variable is going to be the variable that holds all of our data about the page that we're on. So it's going to hold the title, the author, the content, all of that stuff that we're going to be using inside of our template. So we need it in the global space. We're going to globalize it here. And then again, we have just a big sort of switch function here, switch statement. So we're going to do switch this based off of the template type, which is the thing that we just figured out. So again, up here, we just figured out the template type. Now we're using that template type, and we're going to run this big switch method, or this big switch function off of that. And so we're going to have several cases here. The first one we're going to go through is going to be case category. Now, categories are a little different because categories are all stored in one file here. We're sort of not pulling in that data from separate files and so forth. It's all in one file. So, and so we have to do this a little bit differently. And because with categories, we're also going to display information about the category, but that's not really the big thing about categories. The big thing about categories is the posts that are in them. And so again, it's just a little bit different. So the first thing we need to do is figure out, okay, we need to grab our category. Now remember, from our categories here, this is a JSON object that ultimately through our getCategories function gets turned into a PHP object. And what we have available in this categories up here is a PHP object. So we have a PHP object with all the categories that we've created. Well, we just want the specific one that we're after. So we're going to set category equal to, and it's going to be this categories, and then we're going to, the key that we want is whatever our slug is, right? Because remember, we now changed our slug up here with is category. we set this slug equal to what we parsed out as our slug here. That's why we did that. So now we can use that over here. So that's going to grab us the specific category that we're after from our categories object. And then now we can use that to create our page information that our template needs. So we're going to say page equals new, and we're just going to do standard class like this. And then we're just going to explicitly set all these page title equals, and this in this case the page title will be the category name, and the page content will be the category content, and then the page posts in, which this is unique to categories, that's going to be equal to category and then posts. Right, and again, these are all properties of the object that we created over here. So post, name, slug, content, etc. Right, so that's all we're referencing over here. Okay, so that essentially what this is doing is it's taking our category information and it's putting it into this page object, which we globalized up here, which we are going to use to populate data inside of our template. Okay, so the reason that we've moved it from category, sort of a category context, to a page context is simply because we're using eventually we're going to use all of the same functions, and they're going to reference this page object here, and so we need to just build it the same for every category or a page or a 404 or a post, etc. All that needs to be the same so those functions can reference the same object. And that'll start to make a little bit more sense as we go through this. The next one is an easy one, so we're going to do case RSS, and in this case we're just going to break. Right, so we don't need to do anything with it. As a matter of fact, I guess we probably don't even need this in here, to be honest, because we're not doing anything with it anyway. So the RSS is going to be handled completely by the template file that we're going to create for that, and we'll sort of get to that here after a bit. And actually we do need this now that I think about it, because we want to keep it from going down to the default if we are on the RSS feed, right? Because otherwise, what we set for the default if we don't put this in here, it'll run this case and it'll do nothing. But if we don't put it in there, it'll keep going and go down to the default, and that actually isn't going to work for us. So we actually do need that in there. And then the next one is the home page. So if the template type is home, then this is where, and actually we need to, let's go ahead and create our page file here, because we need our page file at this point. So we're going to do page.php. This is where we're going to store all our functions related to pages. We'll come over here to index, and we can copy this one and just change this to page.php. And then if we take a look at if we look at that, then we can, if we open up page.php, we can essentially do the same thing we did here with our get post, but now we just change this to get page. So get page, and we change this to page. Okay, so it's virtually the same function, but these are helper functions. So it's okay if you're repeating stuff a little bit here, because the whole point of them is to make templating easier. It's not necessarily to make, you're not necessarily focused so much on efficiency here. You're more focused on ease of use when you get to building the template. Okay, so let's make sure and save this, and then inside of Rourke under case home, then what we can do, if you remember here, it's get page, and then we need to pass in the slug. So if we're on we know we're on the home page, and so we are going to do markdown. And actually, no, we can just go page equals get page, and it's going to be home like this. Okay, and then break, and then case for page is going to be very similar. It's going to be page equals get page, and then it's going to be this slug. So we're going to pass in the slug and break. And then we're going to do the case for post. So if it's a post, then we're going to do page equals, and this time we're going to do get post, and we're going to pass in this slug and break. And then the final case is going to be default, and that's if none of the others are met. And this is going to be page equals, and it's going to be get page, and it's going to be the 404. Okay, so just to recap here, we've got our template type up here. We set our template type here in set template. We know what that is. Now we're calling doPage, and in that we're switching off of that template type. If it's a category, we're grabbing the category and then building our page variable, our page object manually. If it's RSS, we're doing nothing. If it is the home page, we're calling get page for the home page. If it's a page, we're calling get page for the specific slug that was passed. If it's a post, we're calling get post for the slug that was passed. And if none of those are met, we're calling get page for the 404. And again, get page is going to get the path to that particular piece of content, check if it exists, parse the markdown, and then return ultimately the object here. And I guess we can do page, and we can do page, since this is get page, makes a little more sense contextually. And so again, this is what doPage is going to do. Now, the last thing that we need to do is we need to load our template. But before we can load our template, we need to actually have template files. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're not going to create all of those. We're going to create sort of the placeholders for them. So we're going to sort of close these up here, and we're going to create a new folder here, and we're going to call this templates. And then inside that, now this is going to work where you can create, I'm going to create one called default. You could create this like you could create, say, a WordPress theme or whatever, and you could switch them as long as you've written the templates, they're there, they exist, etc. You can do that. Okay, so that's how this is going to work. One thing we need to do now that we've set that is we do need to set whatever the template is. So we're going to set protected, and we're going to do template equals default. So now if you wanted to switch your template, you would of course build the template files inside of a folder in this templates folder, but then you would also switch this out. So if you made one called portfolio, you would change this to portfolio, so we would pull those files instead. Okay, but in this case we're just going to use default. Now inside of default we have a number of template files here. Again, we're just going to create placeholders, so we're just going to create a bunch of files. So we're going to do 404.php. Let's do category.php. Another one is home.php. Then we are going to have page.php, and we will have post.php. And a little bit later we will get to RSS .php. Okay, so those are the different templates that we have at this point. We will have some other template files, but those are going to be more helper files. Now, just so we can see what's going on here, I'm going to put the name of the template in each one of these files. So 404, here we have category, here we have home, we'll save that. Here we have page and post and RSS. Okay, so if we load these files, we'll be able to tell. I'm going to kind of close all these to clean out this up just a little bit. But again, if we go back to index.php, we're instantiating a new instance of Rourke, and then we're calling this doPage method. Inside of Rourke, we're figuring out what our slug is. From that, we're getting our template, and then we are coming down here. We're building our page object that we need to populate the templates. And then, like I said, the last thing we need to do is we need to load the template. So after this switch statement here, we're going to then call a method called this load template, which we haven't written, but that's what we're going to write right now. So we're going to say protected and function load template. And what load template is it's essentially, we're going to do two things. So we're going to globalize template type, and we're going to globalize something called page slug. Now again, these are template type exists obviously, but page slug doesn't. But these are, again, putting these into the global space so that they can be used by the template files. That's why we're globalizing this. So we're going to set page slug equal to this slug, and then we are going to set template type equal to this template type. And again, that puts those into the global space. So now the slug and the template type will be available in the global space so that the template files can use them. And I'll show you where that comes into play a little bit later. But the big thing that we're after for this method to do is we need the template path. So we're going to do template path equals, and we're going to do a sprint F on this. And so our format is going to be our first placeholder, and then it's going to be our first placeholder, and it's going to be /templates. That's the folder where our templates are loaded. And then it's going to be our second placeholder, and then a slash, and then our third placeholder, and then .php. And what we're going to populate that with is our absolute path. Okay, so that's what's going to go in the first placeholder. So it's going to be absolute path, and then /templates. And then we need this template. So we need which template we're going to use. And then we need this template type is what we're after here. Okay, and then we're going to include that template path. We're going to include that template file. Okay, but I'm going to comment this out for a second so you can see this path real quick. So let's go echo template path. So you can see what this path actually looks like. All this is doing is building a path to a file. And so we use this template because remember we have this template here. We set this template to default up here. So that's going to drop that into the URL or to the path. Our template type is whichever one of these is, and then we're going to add .php to the end of it. So if everything went right here, we should get that path echoed out to us here. call to protected method doPage. So I made doPage protected, but we're calling it in a global space, so I need to set doPage to public. Okay. Let's see what that gives us. And so now you can see the path. Home, Ubuntu, workspace, Rourke, templates, default, home.php. Okay, and if we go to about, it's page.php. If we go to lorem ipsum, it's post.php. These are the right template paths here. If we go to category /demo, and then it's category.php. Okay, so that's what this is all doing. And then of course this include is actually going to include those files. Let me just figure out where I'm printing out. Maybe I'm echoing. All right, so we can get rid of this right here since we've sort of worked through all this. So we'll get rid of this. So now we're actually including the template files. So what we should see is those names that I put into those template files. So category, if I just go home, we got home. If I go to lorem ipsum, I'm getting post. If I go to some crazy gobbledygook, I should get page, but it's 404 page, etc. So no, that's what this all does, is it allows us, and then we can, and actually if we go to, let's just go to page.php. So let's go to this template file. If I can get it to open. We can, instead of doing page, we could do PHP global, that page variable we created in the global space, and we can do print r, and we can do page, and this should give us the information about that particular page. So if I go to about, you can see we get the object, we get title, slug, author, date, content, etc. And now all we need to do is build our template files and populate those template files with this data. So that's what this allows us all to get to at this point, and we're getting to the point now where really we can just sort of break down to creating our actual template files, which is what we're going to do in the rest of the course. Hopefully you're enjoying the course up to this point. Now, if you'd like to keep going and finish it off, all my courses are available on Skillshare. And not only will you get access to all of my courses, but over 20,000 others on web design and web development, freelancing, graphic design, online marketing, and more. And it's all for just $10 a month. And as a teacher on Skillshare, I can give you a 2-month free trial. You'll get full access to the entire library of courses, and you can cancel at any time before the trial is up, and you'll never be charged a penny. To learn more and to start your 2-month free trial, head on over to johnmorrisonline.com/Skillshare.